All right, you guys, welcome back. I am super excited for today. This is somebody that I found on social media and I shared the video with Delancey, and it's just a heartwarming video if you haven't seen it. I believe I found it on Adopted, one of those like adoption, one of those sites. Anyway, it shared it and it's the cutest. It's her daughter with her husband and just so incredibly sweet. And so I reached out to
Mhm.
her and I was so excited when she said yes to come do this for us. So we have Joe on here today, and I will let her go ahead and just take it away to introduce herself because honestly, I don't know very much about her. So I'm super excited to learn more about her.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Joe Walker. And the reason I say a Walker with an accent, an American accent, is because I'm originally from South Africa. And so I moved to the United States 16 years ago. And I'm guessing that's where you assumed maybe I was from. I don't know. Australia.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I was thinking Australia, but the more you
Yeah.
talked, you sound a little British, and then I was like, but wait, in South Africa, they sound a little British too. So
Yes.
I'm. It's very dangerous to go ahead and be like, oh, you're obviously from. So it was one of
Yeah.
those three for me.
I
Keep
get
going.
that all
Sorry.
the time. I'm like, oh, you're from Australia. I'm like, same hemisphere, just a little different, but it's all good. Yes. So yeah, so I say my name with an American accent because when I became a Walker, and I always share this story because it makes me laugh, but I made a reservation and I was so excited about my last name. It just got changed because my name prior was Van Asvieten, because I'm from Dutch descent. And so I was like, oh, good, I have like a regular name now. Like I don't have to be like, oh, I don't know how to say this in American. And when I did say it in American, it was Van Aswegian. And I was like, oh, it's really like sensitive. Like that sounds terrible. Like I just want a different name, you know? So anyway, so I got Walker, and so I called a reservation. I said, hey, I'd love to make a reservation for two. And they said, okay, well, who's it under? I said, it's for Walker. And they said, I'm sorry, how do you spell that? I was like, oh, it's just Walker. Oh, Walker. Okay, yeah, Walker. I was like, oh, okay. So I just have to say Walker like that because nobody else in America obviously knows what Walker is. So uh, make it simple for everybody. But yeah, so again, I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to share our story on adoption. Like I said, this is really a God story. And he has just been so faithful in our journey, and it really was more faithful in my journey in surrendering to the idea of adoption. And so like I said, I came from South Africa on a scholarship to America for field hockey, and my parents said, you know, you can go to America but do not fall in love so you can come home. I said, of course. I mean, I'm not, why would I fall in love over here? Like, no. So anyway, I fell in love.
Obviously not. Obviously, that's not going
Right.
to happen.
No,
Duh, mom
why?
and dad. Of
Yeah,
course not.
right. Yeah, so met Steve. He was actually doing ROTC, so military in college, and that was kind of his thing. And I really didn't know anything about the military at that time. We started dating. He came home with me to South Africa for 7 weeks. He asked my dad if he could marry me the last day he was there. And it was kind of a huge thing because my dad called me and he's like, he wants to marry you. And I'm like, Dad, I don't think you're supposed to tell me that. Like, I think that's like a dad, and you know. And he was like, no, I need to tell you because if you say yes, you're gone. Like you are gone forever. Like you are over the
Hmm.
sea. You can't just say, hey, Dad, can you come over and do this? Like
Hmm.
I'm 18-hour flights away from you, you know? So make sure that this is the man you want to marry. And I'm like, gosh, now I feel all like, is he the right guy? I don't know. You know, all the things. And so, but they had no red flags. They were like, you know, we love him. I mean, we've already known him for 7 weeks. However, nothing stood out to us that
Hmm.
was kind of, so if this is it, this is it. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So from there, we were like, okay, we're gonna get married. And we did it. So my family's still in South Africa, and his family's amazing. If he didn't have a great family, I probably wouldn't have married him. Sorry, I
Hmm.
always said I love you, babe. However, like it's the only family I have. I'm like, if I did not get along with your family, I'd be like, oh, I don't know,
It's
I
true.
love you, but not
I
that
mean,
much.
it's true. It's true, though. It's true. You're in a completely different country. You need
Yes.
his family
Yes.
to be amazing. So, okay,
Yes. And
that
just so
makes
much
sense.
cultural difference too, you know, just being from there my whole life, you know, and then moving here, and I'm just like, I'm already homesick. Like I need people
Hmm.
who will love me through that. So
Right.
anyway, he has an amazing family, great Christian family. And so our lives kind of just moved on from, you know, he went to flight school. He's a pilot in the Army. And so he deployed to Iraq. And then when he got back, we moved to Colorado, and then he deployed to Afghanistan and Colorado. And then I was like, listen, I love you, but we can't do deployments anymore. Because I had my first child during that second deployment. I was like, this is, I can't do this. And so he said, okay, well, I can move to a different aircraft, and I can, it's non-deployable, but it's really like US deployable, but it's short term. So it's like a 3-month deployment instead of, and it'll be to like Texas or whatever. So I was like, oh, I can do, yes, let's do that. So he's like, well, we moved to South Carolina because of this whole transition. I was like, we can do that. And so the first year we were here was during like, actually the second year we were here was during like the presidential stuff where everything was going down, everything at the border, like all these things. And he came home, he's like, I love you, please don't freak out. I was like, I love you too, what's going on? And he's like, well, we're deploying. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know. Like, I know that's like the 3-month thing. He's like, no, we're deploying for a year. And I'm like, I'm gonna kill you. Like, literally, like, I want to kill you right now. He's like, I know. And I was like, tell them no, you are on a different aircraft where you are not going. He's like, well, it doesn't really work that way. And I was like, yes. So
I just say I would love to know that conversation, sir. My wife said no.
it was more like, let me go
that.
tell him, you know, like yes. So anyways, during this time, so my son, you know, we had my son, my daughter and my son, and we had already started our paperwork for adoption. And I'm kind of getting to this whole thing, and I was like, you need to tell them that we're in the middle of adoption. Like, you know, we could be going anytime. Like, you know, how is that going to work if you're deployed and we need to go? And he's like, well, okay, how about I will bring this up to the hire and just say, like, we're in this process. Could I get permission to leave if the adoption was during the deployment? And they gave him the green light. And I was like, okay, I feel better about that.
Yeah.
So back up to 2017. I decided to do a fast for that Easter Lent season. And I have done that in the past. I just did it for the wrong reasons. I felt like sometimes I was like, you know what? I'm going to give up coffee for 40 days and I'm going to not drink it just because I was like, I can do this for 40 days. Or I did that with candy, or I did it with like, just like very superficial things. Just, you know, to see if I could do it. If I could do it.
I feel that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so during this Lent season, I was working in ministry at the church. I was on staff there, and I was like, you know what? Like, I really feel the Lord's like prompting to just like for real take this seriously. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this seriously. And so I decided that I would give up an hour of sleep every morning, and I love to sleep. So this was like I'm gonna wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just gonna spend from 5 to 6 o'clock, spend time with the Lord. And because if it's not that time, like the time to get it in with your littles are just, it's like I'm just talking during the day. I'm like, Jesus, Lord, help me. What am I doing? You know, it's kind of like that, you know? And so I was like, I'm going to be intentional with my time. And so I made that cup of coffee the first morning. I got out my Bible, and I like just was like, hey, Lord, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to say. I don't know like how I'm going to spend an hour with you, but like, I don't, what do I do? And so, you know, I always have my devotional, and I read through a devotional, you know, every day. And it's just, you know, but it was just kind of like a routine. And I just felt the Lord prompting me to read through James. And so I opened the book of James, and I was like, yeah, I'm just starting James. I mean, I don't think you usually start in James. Like, I don't know why. I just felt this overwhelming thing, like James. I was like, okay, James. So I opened my Bible, and at the time I was going through this, we're having a little bit of work done in our house. Sorry if it's banging. But so I opened my book, and at the time I was doing, my Bible was an older Bible that I was working through. And I'd had this Bible since I was probably 15. So it was kind of, you know, it's not as advanced as some of the other ones. And so I turned the page, and the verse on James 1:27, that we have to take care of orphans and widows in their distress. And I was like, okay, yes. And I underlined it. And on the top left-hand corner, I had written adopt a child 2010. And in parentheses, Pastor Donnie. I was like, I don't remember writing that. Like, I don't remember writing that. 2010, we were in Alabama at flight school. Like, I had no recollection of like writing that down. And I was like, well, that's not for me. Like, I don't know who wrote that in there. But I knew it was my handwriting. I was just like, I don't know what that is saying, but that is not for me. So anyway, so I just kind of carried on, like pretty much like the next day, I was like, okay, I opened my devotional, and the devotional was on, again, something on adoption. And I'm like, yeah, okay, like that's cool, like my husband and I had never spoken about adoption. I was like, that's never really been my heart. Like, I love orphans, don't get me wrong, like I love doing missions, like, but adoption was really not like, I was like, I have 2 kids, that ship is like, it's closed, like we sealed that deal, we have a boy and a girl, like I'm like, we're good. And so I'm not even kidding, like the next 2 days it was like on adoption, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know, like, do I talk to my husband about this? Like, I just feel like the Lord is like either asking me to consider adoption, or he's asking me to like go tell people, hey, you need to adopt kids. Or like, oh, I need to get involved in like an agency that like helps and brings awareness to this. So I spoke to my husband and I was like, hey babe, this is really random, but I really feel like the Lord is like asking me to consider adoption. He's like, without like saying any, like there wasn't even like a break, he's like, I've always wanted to adopt. I'm like, wait, I was like, wait, what? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I've always wanted to adopt. I'm like, okay, we've been married at this time for 10 years. And like, you have never in the 10 years said, hey babe, what are your thoughts on adoption? I was like, this is just so random. He's like, yeah, I think this is a great idea. We should do siblings. Like we should. I'm like, okay, what? Just
Slow down.
it is.
Slow down.
Just like, well,
And I said, he got
I'm
excited
like,
and was like,
yes, he's just going full out. And I was like, okay, well, I need like to make sure that this is really something the Lord's calling me to, because I want to make sure like my posture is in the right place. Like, I'm not adopting because oh, children need saving, or like we need to bring kids into, like I want to do it because like the Lord is calling me to do hard things in a place of like surrender. And so I was like, let me just pray, and I'm just gonna, you pray and I'll pray, and then like let's come together and we'll figure this out. And he's like, okay. So like I continued praying, and I felt so terrible because I'm very faithful, and I've always been in the faith, but it was this time I was doubting. I was like, Lord, if this is really what you want me to do, like I need like burning bush clear. I need you to put it in my face. I need you to close doors if it's not. Like, I am sorry being so needy right now, Lord, but like this is a big deal. And it was more a big deal because culturally, even in South Africa, like adoption is not a big thing. Like it's not very common for people to adopt in South Africa. So it's for more the African American community, not African American because they're not American, the Africans in South Africa. I'm like, they are not African American, they're Africans. So like for the African community, they just kind of rally around each other and take care of each other's kids. Like if there's, it's not really it's adoption, but it's not like legal adoption, if that makes sense. And in the white community, it's such a small percentage. Like there isn't a lot of opportunity to adopt, and there's never really a lot of cross-cultural adoption or cross-racial adoption because of the tensions in South Africa with apartheid and segregation and all those kind of things. So it was never really part of my upbringing. And so I was like, gosh, I don't even know anything about adoption. Like I don't know, like this is really crazy. But I know as Christians, like we're adopted into the faith, we're adopted in, and God's our Father, that we get to be a part of his family. And that's always kind of been in my spirit, in my heart. And so anyway, bless his heart, the Lord showed up for me multiple times, again and again, like just with clear visuals, with people, with like all these things. And my husband would make fun of me because I was like, well, do we do domestic? Do we do international? What do we do? And international was $40,000. We don't have $40,000. We're just like regular people who, have a job, and we live, comfortably, but we don't have like 40,000 just laying around, be like, yeah, and so, and my husband is like a planner, like he's very like, he does the budget and he's all the thing, and I'm the free spirit. I'm like, oh, just let's give, and like that, and he's like, where is this tree coming from that you're just like, you know, I'm like, I don't know, but it's there, you know, and he's like, you need to whoa. So anyway, I was like, well, why don't we go check out a couple of agencies, ask questions. And so we went to one and we were like, well, what about adopting from South Africa? Because I'm from the culture, it might be like an easy transition language wise, like that might be easier. And then we found out that we could only adopt over 6, and most of the children from South Africa would be HIV positive. And not that that is a reason not to adopt, but we knew that we wanted to adopt in what is it called? Birth order. So we needed a child younger than our youngest. And at the time, my son was 2. And I'm like, I don't want there to be this level of hierarchy and who's, you know, so I was like, you know, we need to focus on the youngest that we can get. And we have a 2.5-year-old. And so we went to another agency and I was like, I don't know what to do. And they said, just pray about it. So we looked at Afghanistan and Iraq because my husband was there and his heart broke for the children there and just the darkness and this what they were going through, the struggle. And we were told that we would not be what's the right word? We wouldn't qualify because we're not Muslim and we're not culturally they really don't, and it's really close to adoption anyway. And so I said, okay, well, that's out off the table. So we knew we wanted a girl, and the reason why we knew we wanted a girl, and this is kind of goes back to like the Lord has kind of been speaking to my heart since 2010, was when my daughter was born in 2012. So 2 years from that, 2014, she was 2, very verbal. I don't know if you know girls, but she was verbal from like who knows when. Spoke a lot. And while Steve was deployed, she woke up one night and morning, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. She was an early bird and she's like, Mommy. And I said, how did you sleep? Did you have good dreams? And she said, yeah. Jesus told me that I'm gonna have a sister. And I said, really? She's like, yeah. I was like, okay. So then when I got pregnant with our second child, I was like, it's a girl. Like, I just know it is because Jesus told Leah. Like, I knew like already.
Yeah, obviously. Obviously, it's a girl. Obviously.
Yes. And so, you know, I'm like in my mind, I'm like, oh, I always wanted like to have a sister myself. And like, she's going to have a sister. It's going to be so cool. And so she came with us to the ultrasound and they did the ultrasound and the nurse was like, okay, you ready to find out what your sibling's going to be? And she's like, yeah, you know, in her mind, in my mind, we're like, it's a girl. And they're like, it's a boy. She's like, she starts crying and she's like, I'm ready to go home. I'm like, oh my God, Jesus made this baby too, okay? Like, it's okay. So she was very disappointed about this whole situation that now she was going to have this brother that she didn't even want. And I was like, explaining, like, there's still a gift and it's going to be fine. And, you know, I remember bringing him home from the hospital and changing him. And she saw his little anatomy for the first time. And she's like, when is that thing going to fall off? And I was like, well, that thing's not going to fall off. That is part of who he is. It was just, yes, it was just like a whole, like her brain could not wrap around the fact that like Jesus told her this and now it's this and like that thing's not falling off and like it's just very confusing, you know.
She's over there like, no, this is wrong.
Yeah,
this is wrong. This is wrong because just Jesus is right. This is wrong.
Yes.
So
yes. So just like in my mind, like, you know, I was like, okay, well, we're done. Like that was kind of God's story. Like that's how it was. And maybe it was just something that she made up. So anyway, fast forward, we were like, you know what, maybe this is the time that Leah gets her sister. You know, we're going to look at adopting a girl, and we wanted to adopt from a place that we knew women had less rights than men potentially. And we just wanted a child to know that they had an opportunity as a female to be whoever they wanted to be. And so we got with an agency and I said, well, what about India? Like, can we pray about India? I told Steve, like, let's pray about it. The next day I go to work at church and my missions director runs out and she's like, hey, I'll be right back. I need to go speak to a friend of mine about doing mission work in India. And I'm like, what? Like, it was just like the weirdest thing. Cause like our church is very involved globally, but like India we was trying to get into India. And I was like, that's so random. And so I call Steve. I'm like, oh my gosh, our church is doing mission work in India. And he's like, okay. I'm like, no, this is a God sign. And he's like, all coincidence. I'm like, no, like I've been praying, like I need a sign. And so I was like, okay, it's going to be India. So we prayed over India. And again, like all these God signs, one of the summers, my parents were coming, and they didn't know anything. Cause I was like, how do I even tell them about like, we're adopting from India. Like, it's like it was anxiety for me. Cause again, culture, like that's just not a thing.
Right.
And so I was like, I'm not going to say anything. I am just going to ask the Lord for more signs. And if it gives me these signs, like I'm going to put this in my story, and this is going to be God's story. And so that summer we were watching like a preview for a movie, and the movie Lion came up. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I still need to watch that. A lot of people have said that. Yeah. I guess
and
it's really heavily in adoption, Delancey. I don't know much about it, but yeah.
Yes. Well, it was funny because it's called Lion.
Writing that down.
Yes, it's a great movie. It's very hard to watch, but it's very good. And so when the preview came up, what?
She's like, no, I'm not gonna watch it.
I'll watch it, but just so y'all know, I'm a very emotional person. That's
yes, well, like I said, it was me too. And so, you know, when I saw the it was like lion, and I was like, oh, this is just gonna be about a lion in like the African safari, blah blah blah. And so the preview keeps playing, and it's about this Australian family who adopt this little boy from India. Yeah, I know, from India. And they adopt another son from India. And anyway, it's the whole story. And then at the end, I'm giving you this, I'm not giving it away all the way, but he tries to find his birth mom. And it's a true story. It's based on a true story. And he uses Google Earth to try and remember where he got on a train, where he got lost, how he was adopted. It's such a cool movie. And then at the end, he finds his mom, his biological mom. And at the end of the movie, they actually show you true footage of him meeting his mom, his biological mom. I know, I get goosebumps because that's my desire one day, that Shawnee could find her mom one day too. But it's very cool. So I would completely encourage you to watch that. But so that summer again, that came up. We went to the beach for a week in the summer with my parents, and it was the randomest thing, but we went to Myrtle Beach. There was just Caucasian people everywhere. And I walked down to the beach just to kind of look at the water, and I turn around where we just put our stuff, and right next to us, this family comes walking down, puts their stuff next to our where we were sitting, and it's this Indian family. And I'm like, that's so random. Like in my mind, I'm like, oh gosh, this is another God sign. Like God is like, you know, because there was literally, I'm not even kidding, like I stopped and like looked, and like I don't see any other person of color here except them. And like all these Caucasian people. And then I like go back up, I turn around and look at the ocean, and my daughter is with their family playing in the water with them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just like another, and I know I can send you these pictures. I took a picture of it because I was like, I just want to remember God's faithfulness, like in this doubt, in this season. But I took a picture of them just like with her sitting in the water and them just standing there playing. And I'm like, oh Lord, like this is crazy. So the last thing that summer where I was like, okay, Lord, I still feel bad. I'm like, Lord, more, I need more. It's like, just give me these signs so that I know. And so at that time I was teaching an indoor cycle class, and it's called RPM. And what it is you get the music, and you learn the choreography, you learn the songs, and then you teach it to the class. And so that part, and you get it every 3 months. So this summer was like when my parents were here, I got the music. I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to the songs, learn the choreography. And so I go down and I'm listening to the songs. Song number 6 is called Indian Summer. Like, in the world? And it was like legitimate, like Indian music. It was like, I mean, it was just like, it wasn't like just named that. It was like legit Indian, like RPM music. And I was like, okay, Lord, you, sir, too much. I was like, thank you, Jesus. So anyway, there were just signs that like came up on, you know, over and over and over again. And I was like, okay, need to say yes. Like, we need to move forward with this. And then there were those days where your 2-year-old was acting like a crazy person. My son, I mean, my daughter has always been just very calm and just like easygoing and just, I say she's just full of, I don't know what, the Holy Spirit and love and grace and all these things. And then my son came along and he's like head banging and like 10, I just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? You know, this is awful. And he really made me doubt so much. Like, I was like, I can't even take care of my own kids. Like, look at him. He's like head banging. I'm like trying to control him. He's like running into walls. Like, I'm just like, this is, Lord, I need you to this. I'm just kidding, Jesus. I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I need to focus on my family. And I remember going to speak to a friend of mine who is very faithful. And I said, listen, Lord, like the Lord's calling me to this, but I do not feel like I am the person that needs to be doing this. Like, I feel overwhelmed. Steve is like deploying. Like, it's just all these things where I was like, I'm not a good mom. Like, I don't, look at him. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to pray about this and I'm going to come back to you. And I was like, okay. So the next day she's like, hey, I was speaking with the Lord this morning, and this is what I feel like the Holy Spirit told me, that Satan is going to use whatever it is to derail you from going to advance his kingdom. And right now he's using your weakest link, who's your son, to say, you're not a good mom. You can't control your kids. You're not going to be able to do this. Two's too much. Adding another is too much. And it was like, I kind of felt like this weight was like lifted, because I was like, oh my gosh, you are so right. Because that is the devil's going to come in and try and destroy whatever it is that can advance his kingdom. Yeah. And I was about to pull that plug, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't. And so she's like, we're going to pray over your son. We're going to pray over Ray. We're going to pray over your family. And not that it went away completely, but we just started praying for like the devil to leave, like just to flee from this house, to flee. And his behavior changed slowly. And it was just like so amazing to see God work in ways where if you're not recognizing that there's spiritual warfare and that Satan tries to come and seek and destroy, you wouldn't think that way. Because at that time I was like, he's just terrible, but he was terrible because Satan was trying to make things uncomfortable. And so I was like, you're right. We're going to pray and that's good. So anyway, going through these doubts, again, my husband was working a lot. He was working. So now he's doing civilian and military. So he was just gone all the time. And I remember, I don't know if you all had this experience, but it was probably like 4:00 and I text him, I'm like, when you coming home? I was like, it's time for you to come home yet. Like, how far are you from home? Like, I need you to come home. Like, I need a break. And this is so crazy. And he's like, I'll come home. And it was a night that I was teaching RPM. So I didn't even want to teach. I just wanted to get out the house. Like, I was like, I'm only teaching because like, I just want to get out of the house. Like, I don't even want to teach this class. Like, that's how overwhelmed I felt. I'm like, I've wiped 1,000 bums today. Like, I've done the laundry. I've cooked the thing. It was just like all that stuff. And so he came home, he's like, just go. And I'm like, okay. So I go to the class and you put on a face and just like, hey, everybody, how's everyone doing today? People, I'm like, I don't even want to be here and teach this class. I'm like, just want to like go drink some coffee somewhere and just like be by myself and try and eat some ice cream, So I get on my bike and I'm busy getting everyone ready for the first song, and this lady walks in, and of course I don't assume where people are from. I don't assume. She came in late and I was like, do you need help setting up? She's like, no, I'm fine. I've done this before. And she gets on and I teach the class. And after that, another lady came to me and said, hey, I wanted to ask you about a worship night that was happening at our church. And I was like, oh yeah, this is when it is, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you like see someone staring at you, like from the corner of your eyes, like really awkward, like she's waiting to talk to you, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, yeah. And so everybody left, she stayed. And I was like, hey, she's like, I'm sorry I came in late. I'm like, oh no, that's fine. Like, things happen like that. And so she started talking to me. She's like, I heard you over speaking to somebody about this worship night, and we just moved here and we're trying to find a church. And I was like, oh my gosh, you should come to this worship night. It's going to be wonderful. And she's like, okay, where is it? And blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, where did you move here from? And she goes, my family and I just moved from India. And I was like, of course you did. I mean,
course you did.
of
Of
course
course.
you did. Why wouldn't you have, of all the things. So anyway, I started crying. I was like, this poor woman probably thinks I'm still crazy. I was like, I think Jesus sent you to me on this level. I just needed encouragement. Like, I'm so overwhelmed that God's calling me to adopt from India and all these things. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'll help you. Like, it's okay. And even in Indian culture, like that is not, they don't want you to adopt their children if you're Caucasian, but she was a Christian Indian and she's like, no, like, this is great. Like, if you need anything, she's a doctor as well. And I'm like God just like put people in our midst. Anyway, Steve was still hung up on all the finances. And I was like, listen, God has made this clear. We're saying yes. And if we're saying yes, he's going to provide, like he's going to provide the finances. So don't stress about it. He's like, okay, let's do this thing. And so I was like, okay, get the paperwork done, all these things. We did our fundraising and got all the money that we wanted to do. And it took a long time. I think we finished our home study in December of 2018. Then in 2020, January of 2020, we got our match. And so we got the little picture, and I think you've probably seen it on our Instagram, the little one over that says child profile. And so we got that profile. And so it arrived in my email. And I was like, I looked at her, I'm like, this is her. Like, I knew, because I'm sure you all know, like you can decide within a week whether you want to accept the file or if you want to put it back in the data. And I was like, this is her. Like, oh my gosh, I just know it. And so I was like, okay, I was like, Steve, we got the match. She's like, okay, let me see. And so I showed him, it's like, I think we need to pray about this. And I'm like, what? He's like, this is not what I expected. And I was like, what were you expecting? He's like, I don't know. Like, I didn't know that she wasn't going to have like arms that were like, and I was like, well, that's between you and God. Like, you guys need to go back. I was like, because this is my child. Like, I like instantly was like, this is her. And so he's like, okay, yes, I am going to pray about it because I want to feel that bond. Like, I want to be able to be comfortable and know, like, this is my daughter. And I was like, okay, well, you pray, and then we're going to come together on day 3 because we only have 5 days to make a decision. And so he's got a great group of Christian men who they meet once a week. And, and he kind of brought that up to them. I didn't know this. This is kind of what came out later, but he brought it up to them. And he's like, I need prayer. Like, I'm kind of struggling with this because like in my mind, like I'm just thinking like a typical child that has limbs and there's probably going to be some trauma and some struggle, but we'll get through that. Like, I think for him in his mind that this child was not what he expected. And so I was like, okay, well, day 3's here. Like, let's talk about this. And he just said, he's like, Joe, I honestly, like, I'm not 100% sure, but I know you are. And I know the Lord has spoken to you, and I'm going to trust you with this. And I know that if I say no, you will forever think about her and what happened to her. And I'm like, I mean, you're right. Because I really do feel like her. And he's like, well, let's do it. We're accepting it. And so I was like, okay, we're accepting the file. And so, you get all the paperwork and all the stuff. And so we hadn't told our children what she looked like yet. We just said that she may have some kind of special need. Like, that is the only thing that they knew. And that is what our agency had told us right from the start. Like, children that are adopted from India, it's usually something's going on. And so I had this conversation with my daughter, who at the time was 9. And I said to her, you know that your sister's going to have special needs, right? She's like, yeah, I know. I was like, okay. Like, what special, because she hadn't seen the picture or anything. I said, what special needs, like, do you feel like you are like comfortable with, or like that you're like, okay, like this is what it is. And I'm not even kidding you. She said to me, she's like, Mommy, no offense, but if she had no arms or legs, like, I would be okay with that. And I was like, what? I was like, that is great. Like, and I didn't respond like that, but I was just like, okay, knowing that we'd seen the picture and that we were going to reveal this picture to her. It was just like a weird thing how God was preparing her already. And so with that, we did this little reveal, and they got to open, we put a picture of her in this frame, and they both got to open. My son was like 3. He's like, kind of like went over his head. He's like, where's the present? Like, that is the present.
Where's
That's
the present?
the present in the gift. Yeah.
God,
And my daughter, she
kids are
opened
the
it.
best.
I know. And my daughter opened it, and she started crying. She's like, Mommy, Jesus answered my prayers. And I'm like, what? She's like, I'm like, okay, so you've been praying for a sister with no arms? Like, I'm very confused. And she's just like, Jesus answered my prayers. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, not that she was praying for that, but she was just praying for a sister, and she didn't care what she looked like. Like, it was just, I don't care. Like, she's perfect. And I was like, yes, she is. Daddy's struggling, but it's fine. Let's pray for his heart. But with that being said, we so we got the match, we accepted the match, and we were planning to go get her that July. So she was 6 months old, and we would get her in July. And so then the pandemic hit, and so that was March, and so everything closed down. And so we were like, oh my gosh, like we were gonna go in like 2 months, and then COVID and all the things. And so Steve deployed, even with that. And I was just like, Lord, like, what is happening? Like, we want a little one, we want early intervention, we want to be able to be there, and like, and it took, so that was January, pandemic was March. That next year, August, so August of 2021 is when we finally could go get her. And so she turned 2 in July, and we were able to go get her in August. And it was just such a crazy ride, because they had told us her passport was ready. We got there, it was not ready. It was just, we ended up staying in India way longer than we were planning on doing. But with everything being said, we get to the orphanage, and I'm like a child on Christmas. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like we're actually gonna like meet her face to face. And we get there, and all of, I don't know if you've done a mission or gone to an orphanage, but even in Africa where we have orphanages, excuse me, the kids were like running to us. I mean, we're just different, right? We just look different, and like they're just excited to see somebody with different faces. And so they're all coming here. And Shawnee was like in the corner, like, no way am I going to say hi to those people who you are telling me is my ama and my daddy, And I was like, oh my gosh, she's like not coming to us. Like, she was very standoffish. She wanted nothing to do with us. And so they finally got her outside, and we have a lollipop, all the things that they tell you to bring the things, and all the other kids are like, oh, this is so much fun. Like, I'll go with you. And I'm like, I want you to, like, let's all go. And so we finally get outside, and she there's some pictures, but she would give me this like it was like this ugly stare. She's just like, I love you. And it's so bad, because I dyed my hair dark. Like, I tried to like not be so different, even though everyone's like, that's even worse. I'm like, I'm sorry. I was just trying to like dye my hair dark.
You were trying to blend. I get it. You were trying to
blend.
blend.
Indian,
I understand.
Yes. Turned out not in my favor, because I think we found out later that the caregivers weren't very kind to her anyway. And so it was just like, now I'm looking kind of similar, and it's just like I'm a female. And so from probably 20 minutes of being there, she latches on to my husband like a koala bear, like latches on. And I'm like, so awesome. Like at least she's bonding, And so I try and touch, and she's like, I love you. Like, what is happening? Like, usually like they go to the mom,
Yeah.
And like, I'm not even kidding you. For the 2 weeks that we were there, she would not let me touch her. She would not let me rub her. Like, she would pull away. Like, and my husband, like, she was stuck to him for 2 weeks, like stuck. And I think the Lord was just using that as like, he needed that to get over all because they bonded in such a way, because by the end of like the 3rd day, he's like, I'm like, listen, she's gonna like me, okay? By the end of this, she's gonna like me. And he's like, Sure she is. Look, he fell in love with her. Like they just had this bond. If he was holding her and I touched him, she would start screaming. I mean, it was like she was like possessive. Where I was like, okay, hang on, this is hard. I was like, Lord, like you called me to this, like and she wants nothing to do with me. And I cried. I was like, I don't even know like how to start this bonding process with people who have potentially hurt her, who look like me. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And then the hard thing was Steve was deployed. He came to India for that 2 weeks during the deployment and then had to go back to finish the deployment. And so I was like, well, how am I going to do this? Like, he's going to leave. I have my 2 other little ones and this new baby who hates me. That, I mean, literally the only thing I could do was feed her. Like Steve was not allowed to feed her. Like, I'm like, that's how we're going to bond. We're going to bond over food. And so we got home and Steve deployed for the 2 months after that. And we needed that, even though it was so incredibly hard. And like, she had to depend on me for everything. And so then we got to bond during that time. So everything's kind of full circle. So now we're here, 19 months later, and she loves us both. Thank you, Jesus. She has her days. She still loves Steve a little bit. I'd say a little bit more. But for the most part, it's just really been a really good transition. And she's doing so well. And she is doing so many things that I think people wouldn't have thought that she'd be able to do. And to be honest, things that I thought she wouldn't be able to do. I'm like, oh my gosh. And she's so independent. I'm like, let mommy help you. She's like, no, I do. I'm like, okay. But you can't because you're about to hit your head, like girl, like but she's like, I will hit my head.
Girl.
Girl, yes. I mean, she's just super sassy, but so smart. And it's just been such a fun ride. And again, I was speaking to a friend of mine who's adopting. I'm like, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. It's not all like everything's great all the time. What you see on Instagram is like the highlight reels of our life, There's still hard days, and there's days that she has trauma in her background. And so that comes out in different ways at random times, that things that trigger her. And it's just kind of us working through. And even though she goes through that we still love her regardless of, what she's feeling.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's kind of our story. So here we are. We're still new to it, but it's just been such a wonderful journey. And then, like I said, the way that video, I guess, with my husband, just to kind of back up, I had just a couple of friends on Facebook who knew about our story, and they were like, can we follow your story? And I was like, well, I'll do a private thing on Facebook and you can join it. And I think we had maybe 600 of our friends. We've moved so much and we've just accumulated people that we know. And I was like, yes, follow us. And so, the younger generation, my younger friends that I've met, and I lead a couple of high school small groups and middle school, they're like, we don't do Facebook. I'm like, cool.
Yeah, apparently that's a thing.
Okay. Yes. I'm like, well, okay. They're like, can we get it on Instagram? I was like, well, I'll just make an adoption page and you can just follow that if you want to. And so I just kind of was posting on that one and posting on this one, like kind of the same things. And somehow I posted that one and it just went crazy. I think it had like 43 million views or something like that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. But with that kind of views, you get very wonderful comments and you get very ugly comments, and it's just kind of there were so many things. I'm like, you don't know my husband, like just kind of attacking him in a sense of like, well, you probably just killed her family. And I'm like, Lord have mercy. Or like, if she has arms like that, they should have aborted her. I'm like, okay, this is getting a little like too much. And my husband just said to me, he's like, Joe, do not read the comments. Do not read the comments. People are going to be ugly. There's going to be people that are going to be, supportive, but you cannot let it affect you, because I've never really been in I just kind of shared it for people that we love and wanted to follow our journey. And then all these people who you don't know, like telling us who we are and who we are not.
All of a sudden, everybody has an opinion. on your
Yes.
life and they don't even know you. Yeah.
Right.
get
Or
that.
a story and how God really ordained that. And
Mhm.
so yeah, so we just kind of after that, I just said, you know what, Lord, use this for your glory. Like if whether it's good or bad, and it really has been nice because it's open communication to this cross racial adoption. It's open just conversation to like why we did it. And I get to do this, kind of just share the story. Like this wasn't my decision to go to India and be like, let me find a child. Like this really is a God ordained story. And the proof is in the story that I just kind of wrote down because like I needed to be sure for myself. And God just kind of was like, stop worrying about it. Like I've already ordained this. I already know who she is before she was even born, and not that we don't see color, because that is a real thing. But for us, it's like we are all trying to advance God's kingdom and be in eternity together forever. Like that is our ultimate goal. So whether we're white, black, Indian, color, all these different names that this world has put on different people, like it's not going to matter in eternity. And for us, like that is the ultimate goal, is for people to be kind, to people to be accepting of all people regardless, because we all are going to be the same eternally. So yeah, so that's kind of a story. So I don't know if you'll have questions, and I have maybe a couple questions for you guys, because I think both of you adoptees, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you
No.
want to ask questions, and then I can maybe ask you some questions.
I just want to say I love it. I mean, whatever.
every
I don't
bit
know
of
if
it.
Delancey like has questions, but like just like looking over your Instagram, there's just nothing but love from you and your
Aw.
husband and even with your kids, like your daughters, like because they are your daughters, they're just like you can see their bond and it's so cute.
Mhm.
Like, and I just love it. And it's crazy. I don't know that we've really had an international story like this yet with like actually
Not like
going.
this.
Not, and it's just
Not
crazy.
not one. Yeah.
No, we get like a lot more of like the domestic because that's more common.
Yes.
Because I feel like international, I mean, maybe I don't know, has faded away more. I know it was more kind of with me, like because I'm 35, but like more back, but I don't know. But then again, I know domestic's pretty, I mean, popular too. Like,
Yes.
so it's just crazy, like seeing all the signs that you guys had, like,
Mhm.
and that's where for me, I don't understand when people like God is not an adoption, because hello, if you listen to
Yeah.
this story, everything that Joe
Yeah,
went
it's
through
all over it.
and her husband and her daughter, like you
Yes.
can't not,
See, I'm glad you brought up her husband, because this is what I'm curious about. When you first went like, this is our daughter, and he was like, I think I need to pray about this. Did you look, I mean, at any point in time, did it cross your mind? Because the first thing that popped in my mind when you said that was, bro, you were ready to adopt like a million kids.
It's true.
You were like, yes,
Yeah.
I want to do adoption. Let's adopt siblings. And like, you
Yes.
like just went just full speed ahead. And then here it is. And you're like, I need to pray about it.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, just because that crossed my mind. So
Yes, I think for me it was just, I think I kind of put myself in his shoes. Like if you think of adoption, typical adoption, most of the kids look typical, like regular kids on the outside. But we all know, well, we don't all know. I take that back, because if you're not in adoption or you haven't been adopted, you don't know the trauma that these children really have internally. Like whether you're adopted from birth or from an institution, like there is always trauma. Like that's just part of, and I'm sure you guys can probably agree with that. There's trauma there even in utero, when you're being formed and then you're taken away from your parents at birth or whatever it is. And so I think for him in his mind, he's like, hold on, like this child does not look like a typical child. Like I don't, and he's like, you might be bullied, or like how like this is just not what he thought, I think. And so for me growing up, like I volunteered so much in special needs places, like special needs kids and adults have always been part of my life. Like that's what I did on my spare time, that I was just like, this is hard, oh my gosh. And he's just like, I don't know, like
immediate fear, like, hold on.
just all these things.
Wait a minute.
Yes. So, I don't think it was like this, like a malicious way of being like, oh, I need to, I don't know. It was
Right.
more like his whole experience of like,
Mhm.
this is what I thought it was going to be. And I would get 3 of typical looking normal kids. This child who's like, I mean, the picture was shocking. I mean, if you look at it, now it's like, okay, if your arms are like that, like, is there any other medical stuff? Like, we don't know all, like, everything, but like I said, when I saw it, I just felt this peace, like, this is her. And for him, it was like, again, he's like the checklister, he's like,
Mhm.
can we financially do this? Like, what is she gonna need? All the things that I think a man's brain, they like in one box, I feel like sometimes, like a woman's brain's like spaghetti. It's just like all the things all together. And he's like, I'm in this box. I'm like, well, go to the next box. Okay, I'm in my third box.
Move to this one.
Yes,
Thank you.
go to this one now. Yes. So again, I don't think it was anything like in a negative sense, but he's like, I just want to make sure that I can bond
Yeah.
with her, knowing like there's going to be a lot of potential things that we're going to have to do for her. But like I said, God already knew that she would bond to him.
Like knew what he needed. Yeah.
Yes.
And see,
yes.
and that's what I love about it, because it's like he was so gung-ho about it, and then it was just like, wait, hold on, reality setting in that this may not be exactly what I was originally thinking. Let me
Yes.
think about this. And I love that the men rallied around him and was
Yes.
like, we've got you. Like, I
Yes.
think that's super important for anyone, any man that's going through the adoption process. Find you a group of men to rally around you, because you need the support just as much as the woman does. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
It's true.
Yes.
That is, yeah, that's amazing. I think that's like, I'm not saying that men that we haven't interviewed haven't had support, but I think that's the first time I've
Right.
actually heard it, like heard
Right.
them say it.
like heard them say, yeah, like say
Yeah.
it out loud, that they have like a support group, like a group
Yes.
of like their village.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like women, we always talk about we have our village. We always talk about our village. We
The
talk about
tribe,
our
yeah.
girl group. We talk about our boss ladies. We talk about all those things. But for men, it's just such a, I don't want to say like a shameful thing or something to be.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that, but it's just not talked about.
Yeah.
They don't have emotions, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. They're all, well, I mean, especially like military men, they're all stoic. Like,
Yes.
I mean, because my brother-in-law is retired Navy,
Oh,
and when you were
that's
talking
good.
about your husband's the checklist person, and then you're the free spirit, I was like, oh gosh, that's my sister and her husband to a T,
Yes.
to a T. So but he has the same thing. He has a group of men through the church that he's met, and that he's
That's
a
awesome.
group of men that he's met through his military career that he can rely on to that support. So I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I don't know that I really have any more questions
I don't
as
know
far
that I
as your
had- yeah, that
story
was
goes,
my-
because it was just so good. And
good.
you answered everything when you're like, well, then this happened, but then this happened. Like, so
Yeah,
it wasn't really like,
you were
okay, like,
so like detailed, and I love that. I'm all about the details.
Yes.
Like I'm all about the details. Devil's in the
Yes.
details. So like all about it.
yes.
But you said
and-
you might have questions for us.
yeah.
Yes. Well, I
Interesting.
think I think for me, the hardest thing is, and again, like, I feel like you see, I don't want to say this because, I was like, no, Lord, we're not going to do this. And then I'm like, we did this. So, but I always like, we're done. I feel like we're done, with adopting. And I feel like our, sorry again for them working on a house. If you can hear that, I don't know if you can, but kind of loud.
No, I was gonna say
but
I can't.
anyway.
I can't.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I can't hear
perfect.
anything.
So, I just feel sometimes guilty that she's not going to have a sister who looks like her, or that understands her from like an adoption point of view, but also cultural point of view. And so, like, what is your opinion on like single adoption versus like multi-child adoption, or like, do you have experience in being adopted, like with another sibling, or just being a single adoptee in a
That's so-
family? Like,
No, that's just
Yeah.
so crazy because she is a
That's-
multi and I'm a single adoptee.
Oh,
Well,
that's
but
cool.
it's interesting though, because like I'm a multi, but like we're not from the same
correct.
parents. We're like, and there's a 10-year age gap, but it's that's so crazy. That
I've never thought of us that way.
I've never thought of us that way either.
It's crazy. No,
Oh,
like, do you want us to just give kind of like how we feel with both of us?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So with me, I'm single, and I am Colombian, and my whole entire family's white, so Caucasian. But like, I get where you're coming from with maybe she'll feel different. Like I had that, but it was never something that brought me down, because I think because like with my parents and my siblings, I'm theirs and they love me and it didn't matter. And my parents embraced my differences. It was never something that like, oh, you'll never have this because you're not like this and you'll never have, they embraced all of that. And so it definitely was different for me when I did find my birth family and I saw physical features and mannerisms that were the same, but it wasn't anything that was like, oh my gosh, I missed out on all these years. It was nothing like that. It was just like, oh, this is very cool that there are people out there that look like me. But for me too, when I started having kids, that, what do you call, I don't know, kind of, and it wasn't even a hole, just kind of was like, oh, wow, my son just did that. My daughter just did that. Holy cow, I do that. So that was kind of cool to see too. But for me, it was something never, I don't know, maybe because my parents were just so open and honest with everything that I never had to question anything or feel anything different. And my parents just embraced that part about me, that I was adopted and that I had different things, but it didn't matter because I'm theirs. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, can I ask you, so did you have an open adoption or was it closed until later?
Closed.
No, we're old. We're old.
We're old.
They were all closed back then. We're old.
Oh, I didn't realize that, to be honest. I didn't know that.
Back, because we've actually done some research on this. We did one of our earlier episodes. We looked at closed versus open and how it worked. And both of us, during the time period that we were adopted, it was closed. There was no option for open at that time. And even now, some states still are only closed. Like you have, like it's having open adoptions are only within certain states, and you have to ask for certain permissions. Like I know Milena found her bio mom and like her biological half siblings, and she's talked to them. Have you FaceTimed with them? Am I crazy?
Yeah, no.
Or is it only on the phone? Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, did I make that up? Did I make that up?
No.
I feel like I may have made that up because sometimes I fill in details with my brain, and I like my brain goes mushy sometimes. But like it, like with mine being multi, my third sister, and I'm always very careful not to share her story because not my place to share it. But the parts that I can share is that the way her adoption worked versus my adoption, because there's 4 of us. There's 4 daughters in our family. The first 2 are biological and the second 2 are adopted. The first 2 are pretty decently close in age, I think, like 2-year, 3-year difference between each of them. And then you got me 10 years after the fact, the third one, surprise. And my sister who's adopted, my mom knew her biological mother. And so would send her letters and pictures and updates. So like she had that information. For me, it was, they didn't know about me until 2 weeks before I was born. Like it was the family, they knew the family that was going to adopt me, and they didn't know anything about me, and they backed out of the adoption because they found out they were pregnant. And my mom was like, hey,
oh wow,
we'll take her. Like, we'll take her. Knew nothing about me, but like, we'll take her. Like, hand her over. Our journeys are so different. Both of us have met our biological families. Both of us had relationships with our biological families. I can't speak for how she feels about our family because, it's not really something like we really talk about, but I know for me, and I'm a very, I think God had a very big hand in mine because I'm very much like my mom and my second sister. Very much, even though second sister's a little more free spirit than I am, like I'm a little more like type A a little bit. But like Milena said, I never missed out on anything. I never felt different. My parents were very open with me about my adoption. Now there are a few details that I have learned over the last year.
Yeah, same.
There's some details I've learned that they're like, oh, did we never tell you? I'm like, no, you never told me that. And they're like, weird. Everyone else in the family knows that. I was like, cool. I'm so glad. I'm so glad they all know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
But I never, it was, they picked me up at 3 days old, and it was, this is our daughter. Like, this is our daughter. Like, that's my mom and dad. There's never been a question about it. I don't think I could have driven them any more crazy if I was blood related to them when I was in college. I waited through high school. Like I was kind of easy on them through high school, got to college, lost my mind a little bit, is what it is.
Right. Yeah.
But it's interesting because if you relate the two different adoptions, like just the way our adoptions worked were so different. And with me, it's funny because everyone, and I started when you were saying that there's trauma adoption, there's just a part of it. I started thinking about it because I always thought, no, I never had any. But if I'm fully honest with you about my adoption, my trauma came after I met the bios. And Melena knows a little bit more.
Yeah.
Melena knows about it more. I haven't really shared all of it, but there were just things I've learned over the years that I'm just like, no, God put me with my family. That's my family for a reason. Like, and and we go back to the God's hand in adoption. Like, thank you, God. Like, very, very much so. Nothing against anybody else. The people are wonderful people in their own right. But when it comes to family and who family truly is and the way it fits, 100% God put me in the family I belonged in. So it was never, for me, I never felt, I don't know. Yeah, I did feel a little different. I knew I was a gift. I was told I was pick of the litter like my entire life. So this sounds a little egotistical, but like,
hey, listen, that's great. Yeah.
But, whenever it just worked out that way.
No, and I know you said adoption trauma, and me and Delancey have really felt like we've never had that, and I can't speak for Delancey. Like growing up, and I know it's very, very
it's just later.
Much pushed. Yes, it is. I would have to agree with Delancey on that. It's later.
It's later.
When you're an adult and you can see things, but it doesn't like. I kind of have an ick with the adoption trauma crap because the way that some people portray it is it's like no matter what you have it. And it's like I understand I grew inside somebody else and then I was placed, but like love can still be love. My parents still took care of me, like you know what I mean? But I get with older, if you're gone through life a little more, and then I mean you are gonna have that. I mean, with your daughter, like the bonding and the we've interviewed people that they weren't adopted till later on in life, or they have adopted later on in life, and that I understand 100%, because the first couple of years of like, or 6 years, like you were saying with the other ones that you could have had the chance to adopt, like there's so much that goes on in their little brains, and they remember and they retain so much, that I understand. And it's not saying that like I don't know. So like that's where we kind of but I would agree with Delancey. Like it's not anything I ever would say were in my younger years, but now that I'm an adult and can process more and see more and do those kinds of things, that's where it spouts up. I'm glad you pointed that out, Delancey, because I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, because I mean, if you, as she was talking about it, I was thinking about it. I was like, but I didn't have, like, because 3 days old, I didn't have any. I'm just remembering, like, I didn't have any. I never had that moment, because I've had people ask me, have you ever had that moment where you looked at your mom, you're mad at her, and you said, you're not my real mom? I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself and went, oh my God, I would never, wait a minute. Somebody has actually said that before. That's why you just asked me that question.
Right.
That's a lot to unpack. Yeah. But it goes back to the whole entire thing of, I may not have said those words to my mom. I may have thought that towards other people. Now that I'm starting to think about it, don't try to step in my life and boss me around or force me to do something. You're not my actual family. You are people I'm getting to know. And that's something that, I'll probably be more honest about that later as I still process everything. But that's, that I think trauma can come around. It is. I'm with Melena. I have like such an ick about it, but I understand it because there's no time frame for it to happen.
Correct.
I do think it's quote unquote better to happen when you're older.
No, I get
and you
that.
have
I get that.
more life experience, and you have a better foundation, and you have a village to support you in that way, because in that way you have a stronger relationship, like say with God, you can pray about it and then make a final decision as to what's going to work best for you. Right. But some people don't have that choice. So it's such a, it's a journey it's a different journey for everyone. Kind of like adoption is a different journey for everyone.
It is. Absolutely. Well, and like I said, Yeah, and I think, always want to be sensitive because
Yeah.
you just never know. You never
Right.
know. You two ladies seem like you had an amazing family who loved you and treated you exactly the same, but I don't think that's the case for everybody.
It's
It
not.
could be, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
And I look at, kids international adoption, it's always
Right.
like they're in institution for an X amount of time. And I try and do my research, with brain development and what that looks like as an institutionalized raised baby. I don't even know if that's the right word, but like the brain development is different,
Right.
like flight
Right.
flight is developed first compared to like the frontal lobe. And so
Exactly.
there's like triggers, I remember when Shawnee came, we were trying to potty train, like a couple of months ago. We're still trying, but it's fine. And so was trying potty training, and she had gotten off the potty, and I asked her to like sit on my lap so I can get her panties back on. And so she sat, and as she sat, she like slipped, and she like her bottom hit the tile floor, like not hard. It was just like it touched the cold tile, and it put her. I mean that. It's almost like you can see the trigger, because when we were at the orphanage, I remember it just being cold tile. She had a mat, like a rug. That's what she slept on, but it was all, and she had no diaper on. Like she sat on cold tile for the majority of the day, and then they just like, they don't have diapers. They pee, they clean it up. If they poop, they clean it up. So and then I always tell people, like, you can't get mad or you can't like rip them on.
Right.
Same as a regular child, because
Exactly.
that's a real thing. Like her brain like triggered something, was like, I'm remembering this from this, and I don't like that. Like that is fear.
Right.
And so it just being sensitive towards children who are adopted, because you don't know the triggers or the things that have happened in their past.
Right.
But also realizing that their brains are different. So you cannot raise them the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Right.
I'm
Exactly.
not talking about you raise them the same as in loving them.
Right.
But there
Right.
are, with my child, I put my biological children, I would put them in timeout with the door closed and be like, you can stay there until you're done. With Shawnee, it's like, you're in timeout, but I'm here. The door's open. You can see me, and you can scream as loud as you want, but I'm here. So it's just figuring out those things, or her hitting me in my face multiple times, and I'm like, I know she's not mad at me, like for it's just that something has triggered her.
Right.
That I did that reminded her of something. We're a little bit past that stage now, thankfully. But it's just, love can do a huge thing. And we don't treat her different. Like, I mean, I want to, because I'm like, let mommy help you. And she's like, I think that's another reason God was like, if she came at 6 months, like I would have like spoon fed her. Like I would have like done everything for her.
Yeah.
And she had to learn how to be independent by herself. And now I'm like, yeah, like I would still be doing all these things for you if you came. You did. Now she's like, I do. I'm like, girl, you do. Like you do all you do. And it's so much better. But okay, one more thing I wanted to ask you. Oh, there's probably lots of things, but I know your time is limited. But so would you like recommend, like, do you recommend open adoption, or do you feel like closed adoption? I mean, I know for your experience is probably was the best thing, but like now that it is more normal, I guess, or an option, like, do you feel like that is beneficial for a child to have an open adoption versus a closed adoption until 18 or whatever the age is?
Lindsay,
You want to go first? You want me to go first? Okay.
You go.
For me, because I've been asked that question a few times, like, weren't you ever curious? Didn't you want to know? And I'm over here like, y'all, like the person asking me, it's like, you obviously don't know me, because like I didn't care. Like it wasn't a thing for me. Like I knew my parents were gave me what they could give me. They didn't know a whole lot. But I think from where I'm standing for my personal adoption, it was the best way for me. However, I think the way that it's being done now, where you can decide and adapt and evolve and develop your boundaries as you go, I think that you can never go wrong with having as much love and guidance around a child as possible. I think that, but it's one of those things of the parents, and that I think that's the hard part for, again, I've never had children, I've never been on that part of it, but I can respect that it would be difficult for biologicals to turn that decision over to the parents that are doing the adopting, because in my mind, the parents that are doing the adopting would be the ones to set the boundaries and to set the guidelines. And then the biologicals, as they grow in their relationship, see where it can go and where it can take them. And like, I think it can be a beautiful thing as long as the parents can figure out, and then as the child can just open and honesty and love. You can never go wrong with honesty and love for kids, is what I'm getting at, I guess. Melanie, your turn.
I love open adoption, but I am with Delancey. It's got to have boundaries. It's got to have hard boundaries. And the thing with open adoption is every situation's different, because there's some open adoptions that can flourish and bloom and blossom and everything just works out good. But there's some, the bio parents may not be at a point in their life that they want anything to do with it. So it can be kind of open, but it might be better for them to kind of, get their, I hate even saying this, life together, or what they need to get together in order to show up for their child. Because I can't even imagine having, all those struggles still and still trying to work in that triangle. That would be hard. That would be really hard to get yourself in a place. But the few that I know of that work out really, really well, it's got boundaries. They're very open with everything. I feel like it is, they're closer to where kids can come to parties and things like that. And they've got those kinds of options. Like there's one that I know that like the kids have six sets of grandparents, a huge amount of grandparents, because even like the biological grandparents are involved. And I'm like, that's like every kid's dream. Like Christmas time, here's all these grandmas and grandpas.
Here's all these presents. Like, and you don't even understand why you're getting all these presents, because like to you, everybody should have 6 sets of grandparents. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. I wish it did.
Exactly.
That would be so cool.
I'm with Delancey. It's very situational. So I mean, I love where they're going with it, because I think it will help with adoptees that are our age that just hate adoption so much because of something that has happened with them, that I feel like it's a healing process of, okay, like I've done this, we've done this. But again, it's so situational that I can't just be like, it's for everybody, because
it's fantastic. It's the greatest, but
it might not be for everybody.
It may not, but it's,
I do think amazing things can come from it. Like I do.
100%.
Yeah.
But it just, Melina's right. It's situational.
Yeah.
It just depends. Everyone's journey is different.
Well, I just think it's like, the bio mom, like I look at another bio mom, the adopted mom, I look at her and like her features, and like she is gorgeous, like her face, like it's just like all these like little things. I'm like, okay, God didn't give you arms, but he gave you some eyelashes that are like as long as like who knows, like it's just like I'm like, I wonder often, like, gosh, I just wonder what your mom looked like. And I wonder, like, those kind of things come to my mind. I'm like, gosh, I wish you could see you, and I wish you could see how beautiful you are, and like those are all my, like, I do pray one day that she would want to seek out her mom. And obviously we don't have information at all where she is and where she lives. But I would love that opportunity for her to find her mom one day. And I did say to the orphanage director, I said, if there is a biological sibling, if a biological sibling that's hers, like we would be open to that, because I do want her to have that, but I also feel like we're done. So it's kind of like this hard, like, but again, I do feel like if that is presented to us and the Lord is like, there is another one that, her sister or a brother, like we would be. I mean, my son wants us to adopt another one. Like because now he's on board, he's 7 and he knows what's going on. He's like, I want a brother too. I want to have a sister. I want a brother. I'm like, well, if we get a brother, he's going to be like younger than Shawnee. Like, it's not like he's going to go play football with you outside.
Right.
It's kind of over his head. But, what I'm thankful for is like, God's in their story too, like you said, like they both adore her, to the
Mhm.
point of annoyance. It's just like, leave her
Mhm.
alone. Like, they're just siblings and they love each other, and I'm just so thankful for that. But yeah. But I appreciate y'all's input too. I think
Yeah.
it's so important as
Yeah.
adoptive parents to really get an understanding from people who have been adopted. And I'm so thankful. I'm praying that, I'm hoping that we are raising her the way that y'all were raised, and that, the questions that she'll have one day will just be like kind of water on a duck's back, and that she'll know she's loved and treasured and chosen. And God placed her here for a reason. But you never
Delancey
know.
had some of her friends come on last week, and I'll tell you what I told them. You just being aware of it,
Mhm.
you're already a step
Yeah.
ahead of the game. Like,
Oh,
you
You are.
wanting that better, because that's how they were. They're like, we don't know. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys already like being aware
Oh.
that you want this for your child.
Right.
You're already
You
ahead of
that
the
you
game.
want them, you
Yeah.
want them to feel so much love. You
Right.
want them to know. Like, I mean, Corey even told them, like, whenever, because they're in the process of international adoption. They haven't finalized or profile matched, I'm still trying to understand. I mean, because they've been going through it for a couple of years, because they've had a couple of transitions. And even Corey was like, whomever y'all end up with, or whoever ends up with y'all, or however your family grows and how that looks, he's like, hit the lottery.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because they were the only
Already
one,
aware.
they're the only ones in the panel that where we had a bunch of people together that are going through the process. They have, I mean, we really think about it, the only connection they have to adoption is that they both knew they wanted to adopt.
Right.
That was their journey. That was
Yeah.
the way they wanted to go. They knew that before they even got married,
Yeah.
Wow.
like
That's
each
so cool.
individually. So it's kind of, I think the fact that, just like Melissa said, you're aware, they're aware. It's like, I think the parents that are aware of how they want to make sure that their kids know they're loved and they're open and honest,
Mhm.
kids are going to be
Very-
great.
Right.
that's
Exactly.
yeah.
But I will say, I feel sorry for you during teenage years, because biological or adopted, all teenage girls are awful. We're all terrible.
Yeah, Leah's going to middle
We're all
school next
terrible.
year. It's already going. I'm like,
Oh, you know.
girl,
You know.
like, hey, someone's watching you. I got a reminder all the time. I'm like, not only is your little sister watching you, but Jesus watching you too.
Mhm.
Everywhere.
Everywhere, girl. Yeah. Yeah. I just had to
Oh,
throw that in there, because I know you have two of them, and it's just going,
yes.
biological or adopted, doesn't matter. Teenage girls are
true.
terrible. They're
Yeah.
absolutely terrible.
Thank you. So if you'll just go ahead and pray for me right now. Like,
100%. Yes.
oh, no, it'll be all good. Hopefully, if not, we'll just be on our knees. So
It's true. That's so
Exactly.
true.
It's true. It's very true.
Do you have any
Yeah.
other questions for us, or?
I probably have a whole bunch, but this has been just so good. I just like, thank you again for the opportunity to just kind of talk and tell a story and pick your brain. And I think there's so many people who they just don't know anything about it, and they're
Mhm.
fearful of it. And I was one of them, and I just
Mhm.
I want this to be encouraging in the sense, like, I don't think that everybody's called to adoption, but everyone's called to consider helping or doing something towards
Mhm.
adoption. So whatever
Love
that
that.
looks like, whether it's helping someone financially or bringing a meal or providing something,
Mhm.
like,
Right.
we're all called to be part of adoption.
I
And
love
it's,
that.
I do too, because
Yeah.
it's
That's
so
the
easy
quote.
for people to donate. You know what I mean?
yes,
You
yes.
can
It
donate,
is.
or if you have a friend of a friend that you know that they have adopted, then it's
Mhm.
like, hey, here's $20 to go help on them, pitching a meal for them or something. I
Yeah.
love that. I've never thought of it that way. Like,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, I do
Yeah.
too.
And I really say that because that's really what people did for us. And so I really mean that in the sense, when people are generous and they give because they want to see change and they want to see this child come
Mhm.
home. Like, Shawnee's not just our daughter. She is everybody's daughter that prayed for her, that provided financial assistance, that, Steve was deployed for 2 months after we got home. I had a meal delivered to my house every single day for 2 months.
Wow.
Like, because people were just generous. Like, they
Yeah.
they were part of the story. And, I say because God called them to be part of adoption.
Yeah.
They didn't call them to necessarily go and get a child physically, but their part in the story is provision, their generosity, their kindness, their goodness. Like, all of that made such a difference to us. And so I just encourage others, like, if you called to adopt, like, and the Lord is calling you to that, like physically adopt, like, amen, praise Jesus. But if not,
Mhm.
like, there is so much you can do to help others, bring a child home, provide a meal, whatever it is. Sometimes we just have to look, and see where the need is. So so I appreciate this, and I appreciate the time. And our story, is with Shawnee is slightly different in the sense that she has limb difference, and we get to, I say this very, like, we live in a very in a bubble where I'm from right now, and with the military we've moved so much, so
Mhm.
we are really transplants wherever we go, but this is the longest we've been in this area. And you don't see people like Shawnee where we are. And so it has really been a cool experience to not only, oh, this is the other, okay, you see, this is where my brain goes. Let me finish this, and then I'll ask one more thing. Yes, but it's
love
just
it.
really cool to see, people embrace her and
Mhm.
ask questions, and sometimes kids are like, wow, arms like that. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Ask a little nicer, okay? But it's such a conversation, when we're at the
Mhm.
pool, and then, kids are like, and I'm like, hey, come over here. Like, this is Shawnee, and she was born with limb difference, and this is how she was
Mhm.
made. And then, like, Shawnee's just like, getting the jam scare. I'm like, be kind, be kind. Like, just asking.
Shawnee, be nice. Jeez.
Be nice. Yeah, it's always that. I'm like, we have to
Subtitles on the
prep her.
face.
We do prep her now, because everywhere we go, I'm like, this is where we're going. Be kind. Okay. Like, if someone asks you something,
Love it.
sweet face, not grumpy
Not
face.
subtitle face.
Yes, yes.
Sweet, not
Sweet.
subtitle. I love
But
it. I love it.
you get the angry, the sass is there. Like, anyway. But yeah, so it's just been neat to kind of introduce somebody who looks different, but have conversation with people. So, like, you don't have to be scared. You don't have to be like, oh, well, she looks freaky. Well, that's not very kind, and that really happened to us at the pool. Like, a kid came like, oh, that looks freaky. And I'm like, okay, come here, let's talk, and we had this conversation, and the mom's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry. Like, this is good. Like, this, I would rather have this conversation than you pull your kid away and be like, shh, shh, don't say anything. Like, we need to be open about these things so that kids can be kind, like, because they don't know, she looks different.
Yeah.
So let's talk. So I love it. So, okay, this is my last thing. So I think one of the things I also struggle with is, like, I also want to protect your story, like you said, but I have not now, because this thing went viral. And we have, I think 84,000 people follow her story. So I think for me, the hard thing is I'm putting her story out there because of God's goodness and faithfulness in our part. Like, what are your thoughts or your opinions on, for her later on, being like, well, why would you expose, like, these things, or why would you show people these things? Like, that's my thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, I have had I didn't have those thoughts until people are ugly and post things, and say, like, you're exploiting your child, you are doing this to get money. Firstly, we do not get any money for anything that we posted. Like, that is completely, before I even posted stuff about Shawnee, like, my family was all over Facebook. Like, we've never been like, oh, now we have a child, we're going to put this on social media. That has never been, like, our intention. Like, it was really for our friends to follow our journey, and it just went to something that I was like, I don't even know what is happening right now. So just your thoughts on, like, that potentially, like, yeah, have you ever thought of that? Or
No, and I mean, I've seen people that, like, are super disgruntled when people do that because they think it's all for monetary gain, but I don't feel like your
They're
page
just
is like that at
miserable.
all. Yeah.
They're just miserable people, though.
It's true,
Like,
though.
I mean, like, just reality of the situation is they have a bad day, or they have something going on, and they feel like they can just take it out on somebody, and they feel like there's no consequences behind it.
Right.
But I fully believe that even if you don't get direct consequences for what you do and say, you're going to get some kind of consequence later, because you can't be rude and mean and it not happen. I mean, I know my parents shared my story as much as they could. I mean, there wasn't social media back then, but so it couldn't get, like, widespread, but they were very open about my journey, my story. If there could have been some kind of social media back then, I'm sure they would have done that too. It's in, my personal opinion would be that I think it's important, despite the disgruntled, because Melena's gotten some hateful stuff. I've gotten hateful stuff. It kind of makes me laugh a little bit now because, whatever. Like, if y'all want to be miserable, but you're not going to do it here. And I'm gonna correct your spelling, though. I'm gonna help you out. But I think it's important to share your part of the journey, because you're not speaking for her. You're not saying her emotions, her feelings. You're sharing the journey from your perspective. I think that's important. I think it's important to share your perspective, what you see, what the video that you took. I didn't even notice anything with her arms in the video that Melena had sent me when she runs up to her dad and she like grabs onto his leg. It did not register in my brain. All I saw was a little girl running to her daddy.
Right.
That's all I saw. I did not register anything outside of that, but this beautiful moment of this little girl running to her dad. And it reminded me of those moments that I would run to my dad.
Yeah.
And so it's, to me, I think that's important for people to see that. I think it's important because there are so many people on Instagram that have 80,000 followers, 100,000 followers, 1 million followers that want to say one perspective and they think it's right, and other people follow them and they think that's right. They want to say that you will never love your child, your adopted child, as much as your biological child. I have an issue with that because that's false.
It is.
It's not right. It's not okay. So I think it's important for people who have stories and perspectives like yours, that yes, there are hard days. Yes, these are only highlight reels. I think someone's gonna have an issue with me saying this. I think it's almost like your responsibility to share it.
Oh.
I feel like God's called you to share it. God's blessed your life.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if you didn't share it and share your perspective, just like if Melena didn't share her perspective in his story, if I didn't share my perspective in my story, the naysayers and the negativity and the darkness would win.
Yeah.
And we, as God's followers, we can't have that. We can only, you don't get rid of darkness with other darkness. You get rid of darkness with light. And your perspective, your story is light. When she gets older, she can share her story. But as long as you're not saying she felt this way and, she did that, like it's your perspective as her mom.
Yeah.
I fully support it. I subscribe to it too.
No, and I agree, but I feel like it's also like, so, I have kids, but I feel like I share things that they do. Like, how is that any, I mean, I know it's maybe not what do you call it, intimate or whatever, but if you look at your page, because I just went back to like double check just to make sure, there's nothing in there that's like, would make me feel like, oh my gosh, she's exploiting this child. Oh my gosh. It's things of like, look what she put together with like, because it's the because you have that on there, like limb awareness or whatever, like her playing with toys or her writing, like look at it. It focuses a lot on that, not on like so much the adoption side of it. You just share who she is and everything that she's doing. And it's not just her. I mean, you share your other kids too. You share you and your husband. Like it's like what Delancey said. Satan wants these freaking dumb what do you call them? Negative people to comment. Comment and just want to make people feel like crap because they feel like crap. That's exactly what it is. When people, people then, it's just bad. They take it out of context. And so the only thing they can do is just blame. Well, it's not me. So it's you. Like, it's like, what?
Right. What
did I
like, it goes back to the misery loves company. My favorite was like people even went after my mom in some of the comments. They're like, she made you do it. I was like, first of all, let's be clear.
Wow.
My mother will come on here and flat out tell you she has never been able to make me do anything ever in my life. Not once. I'm the most stubborn child that she has. So to say that she made me do something, Gail would highly disagree with you. Highly. Wow. But that's it. It's just you. I think it would be irresponsible for you to not share your story and your perspective.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of dark out there. I like how Delancey said that. There is a lot of dark out there, especially with adoptees that are our age. They hate it so bad. And so they don't want people to adopt. They don't want to advocate for adoption. And so that's why me and her push so hard to do these kinds of things, because we
love it.
know the blessings that's brought us, and we know
Mhm.
every story is not the same. We're not dumb or naive to that. We know
Right.
that there's hard stories, but it's like,
Mhm.
let's shine more light in this world, because this
Right.
world is so freaking dark anyway.
Well,
Just adoption is
exactly.
dark. It's
Well,
just a dark
and
world.
in every story, and I think I've come to this realization throughout the like doing this podcast and everything, and then mine and Melena's personal journeys too. In my personal journey, there was never darkness in me feeling adoption, like at all, not once, until later when I had to face realities of certain situations. And then it was one of those, it would create such, like, there was such hopefulness, and then there was such anxiety about it. And then it was just like, you know what? Can't do it. Like, it's just can't do that. And I think that it comes from the not like realizing there's a little bit of darkness in every single story. I mean, I think we can all agree that there's a little bit of darkness, a little bit of trauma in every single story. It may come at different times, but you can't live there.
Yeah.
Because if you live there, life's
nobody
not
wants to be
fun.
around you.
Nobody wants to be around you. You don't have like even your village may be like, girl,
Yeah.
what is this? Like, but it's
true.
like there's so much. And yes, you said that, you know, y'all have hard days and everything like that. I think it would be important when you're comfortable with sharing a hard day, share a hard day, so that people realize like you're a human being. We know you're a human being. Obviously you're a human being. Duh. Like but again, there's always going to be somebody that has something to say because they're miserable, and they have their only thing that makes them feel better about the pain that they feel is making somebody else hurt. So don't let those icky comments make you feel bad. Just either do what Kayla does, which is #be blessed, or ignore them, or do what I do and correct their spelling, because 9 times out of 10 they mess up grammar or spelling. Just help them out.
Yeah, that is hilarious. Yeah. No, and I have, like I said, there have been some, and look, I don't get a lot of ugly comments. Like, I think I'm kind of like weaned off of some of those people, you know, that are kind of just like, we're not following this, and that's totally fine. But you know, once or twice you get like these comments, and I do usually take an opportunity to DM them and say, hey, like, why do you feel this way, or why did you feel you needed to say this? In a, you know, on a platform like you have access to DM me or message me. How can I bring clearance or like clarity to
I love that.
To this?
I love
that. And honestly, like some of the ones have been super like they would come back, like we'd have a conversation and they would come back and be like, I'm so sorry I said that, I did not understand it from that perspective, and they deleted the comment, you know. And so
good for them.
So it does give you an opportunity, you know, because my husband was like, just delete them. I'm like, I don't want to, because that's not who I am. Like, I am like,
I agree with that.
You know, like there's a reason they feel that way. He's like, you can't fix people. I'm like, I'm not trying to fix them. I just want them to give somebody, like, if you're gonna say that, what is the reasoning you're saying? Something inside of you is saying it. Yeah, why is it in you? Like, what did I do? You know? And so yes, but there are people who are like, well, I hope she finds her real faith one day, you know, and you know, things like that. And I'm like, I said, I'm not pushing her to be like, we are Christians and we raised her in a Christian family. But at the end of the day, I do not get to say who she serves. She gets to choose who she serves. I'm not forcing her to choose anyone. But my God is a good God who brought her here and has allowed her to have this life. And if she chooses someone else, that is not on me. That is her decision then, you know, who she chooses. So it's just like conversations like that. And I'm just like, oh, it's so hard.
She's way more mature than I am. Way more mature. Because I'm over here like, that's misspelled. That's misspelled. That's misspelled. Go with God. Like,
why
and
just
Joe's over here like, hey, let's have a conversation. I'm like, I respect that. I really do. I hope I can be you when I grow up. I really do.
You know, I always just want to get like the perspective, like, okay, we can disagree, but let me just
See,
She's
that
nicer than
would,
me
for
too.
me, that would scare me more. Like if I had like the balls to go and just freaking comment on something, that would scare me more if they came directly to me, because it'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, they actually saw it, and oh my gosh, they're calling me out on it right now. Versus them
And like
commenting.
directly to you.
Yes,
Directly to you.
yes.
Like, you know what? I
Like-
might see but if mine happened on TikTok, I could do that. Mine
Yeah.
on TikTok, on Instagram, I could do that. Mine usually happen on TikTok, and like you
Yeah.
can't message somebody unless you're friends with them.
Gotcha.
We're not on
Gotcha.
TikTok, so
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
eh.
crazy.
I do
love
applaud
those
you for
people.
that though. I love that you are very much like, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Let's have a dialogue, because you know that terrifies people.
Yes, that's what I
Terrifies
said.
people. They're like,
Yeah. Oh, wait, just kidding.
What do
I
you
didn't say
mean?
it. Delete.
I did right. But I mean, and I also, because I feel the same way that you do about deleting comments. I don't delete comments. I don't do any of that. People eventually delete them themselves because
Yes.
they realize that they look ridiculous. But
Yeah.
because so many of the anti-adoption movement that is out there will do everything that they can to silence us because we don't follow their narrative.
Right.
I refuse. I'm with you on that. I'm not going to delete them because I never want to take away somebody else's freedom of speech, but I'm also not going to save them from the freedom of consequences.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if they say something really bad on TikTok, I don't even have to say anything. Other people like,
That's what I
and
told my
I'm just
husband.
like, let it happen.
Yes.
You
it's
made your
so
bed, now
true.
lie in it. Yeah, you made your bed, now lie in it. I'm not going to come to your defense because I don't know why you even said that. That was really
Yeah.
mean.
Yes.
And now you have like 20, suburban housewives coming after you.
Yep. The trolls trolling the trolls.
The trolls trolling the trolls. I
Yes.
just let it
Yes.
play out. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I get it. But like I said, thank you again. And I'm sure I will probably have some questions and I'll probably reach out via DM and
Please do. Please
yeah.
do. I love your story. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming on here with us. Like this has been a great start to my Saturday.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. And like I said, I think we're 2 hours ahead of y'all. So we've already had some of the day. Yeah.
Are you in Eastern?
Yeah.
Central. So you're an hour ahead of me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. And tomorrow, don't forget time change.
Oh,
again?
Yeah. I
It
remembered that. Oh,
I only remember because I have
daylight
kids. And I'm like,
savings.
oh, we gotta do this thing again.
Wait.
I knew it was coming, but I
Bring
forgot.
forward.
So thanks for
Bring
reminding me, Jill, because I forgot.
Well, I mean, at least my clocks will be right again.
It's right. You didn't change them from last
I
time.
don't change them.
I love it.
Why?
Love it.
Why?
I
They'll
love
be
it.
right. They'll be right again eventually.
Sure. In
I
6
love
more
it.
months, exactly. That's too funny.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hey, well, thanks, Joe. I will close this
You're
out, but
welcome.
really, thank you for coming on and saying yes. And thank you, because we learn
thanks
something
for
new
having
every
me.
time we do one of these, and we appreciate it. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
and I can tag you and stuff in the show notes, and then everybody can go
Okay.
follow you if they want to see your story, because your family's just so cute. So,
Aw, thank
That's
you so
amazing.
much. Thank you again. Thank you for you guys and for sharing your story and just for being for this. I think it's so important to get adoptees' perspective too. So thank you for sharing your stories too.
thank you.